Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So this is the next installment of our collection series, and as promised, today we're going to talk about the Philodendron collection. So I've placed most of them on this frame so I can freely talk about them, talk about the care. I'm also going to give some advice and tips as much as I can, and we're basically going to talk about their plant ID as well. So I guess I should start with the ones in front. Philodendrons right now are really hot. For those that are just jumping into the plant collection world or plant parenthood, that's the go-to plant right now. So most of these new plant enthusiasts are going after these philodendrons for very obvious reasons. You can see it here. The leaves are very recognizable, and then basically the plants are easy to care for, so that's why they're always the go-to plants of plant enthusiasts. So let's start with this plant on the left, my left, your right. So this is a Philodendron Gloriosum. I'm gonna put the plant ID somewhere, hopefully over here or somewhere. So this is a Philodendron Gloriosum. I love it so much. I've had this for about a year and a few months. I think a year and 3 months, 4 months. I got this as a single leaf cutting overseas. And I wanted one for a few years now, but I wasn't ready to splurge on, I would say like a regular or a common philodendron. So I got this a year and a half, I think, ago with just this leaf. And this year it rewarded me with 3 of the smaller leaves. So it's really beautiful. The leaves are very velvety, if you can tell. And the venation is just stunning. So it's really one of the more recognizable philodendrons on Instagram and on social media. Mine is on a chunky mix. So my soil type for almost all of my philodendrons, well, it has some work. So there's some horticultural charcoal, some orchid bark. It has some perlite. I think I even added some vermiculite before. Cactus succulent mix and the regular houseplant or potting mix. So that's what my aroid mix is composed of. Just very chunky, very coarse, so that the water would just pass through it, and adding regular soil mix would retain a bit of that moisture. So for me, my care for all my philodendrons is most of them I let them dry in between waterings because they tend to have root rot if you water them frequently. And as often as I tell everyone about this, I always have the tendency to overwater. So that's why most of them are going to be in terracotta pots to help soak up moisture. So this one is in a really small terracotta pot. This next one is a Philodendron Birkin. So they have been like the it plant, I would say, like middle and last quarter of last year. I have 2 plants in here. You would just love the stripy lines and markings of this plant. So it's quite easy. Since I've had this, I don't really do much. This one tends to like just clump up and not really be leggy and climb or trail. So this is a really good one if you want something that's striking and compact. I think it's really time to separate both of these plantlets. Same aroid mix that I always do. Don't ask me for a ratio because I just really eyeball it. So just, with whatever I have at that time when I mix the soil, I'm just gonna dump it in there, make a coarse mix, and hopefully that'll work. Basically, that's kind of what I always do anyways. So another thing that you have to remember is the smaller your terracotta pot, the sooner that it dries up or gets rid of all that moisture. So something that's on a 4-inch pot may need to get watered more often than something that's on a 6-inch pot. So this one does have this plastic covering that I got from IKEA. Oh, actually, see the roots? It's root bound already, but as much as possible, this one tends to like climb, not climb, but crawl. And so far mine hasn't really done the effort of like crawling outside of the pot. So I think I might not need to repot it this year. Although if you have the space, you can always up a pot by another inch or 2, because that's, you basically base your repotting or your choice of pots on the root ball of your plant and not with the foliage. It can be super bushy on top and you would think like, oh, it will look good on a 6-8-inch pot, but the root ball is super shallow or super small and it can just fit in a 5-4-inch pot. Then that's the right size to go for and not really based on the foliage. When you pot it right, you can then decide to put it on a decorative or a cache pot that's gonna be more proportionate to the actual plant. Like for this one, I could put it on a bigger decorative pot to, you know, be proportionate to how the leaves are expanding or their leaf span, I think. Next is, well, for me, they're one of the more popular philodendron. This is a Philodendron Birkin's Pink Princess. So I've had this for, well, I got one when I just started back in April or May of 2018, when I got this locally at a plant shop in San Francisco. I think this one was, oh, this one, it was actually a cutting that I got online for $8, and the shipping was also $8. And I just saw one go for like 2,000 something dollars the other day, and that's just insane. Same care with variegated ones like the Pink Princess or your Birkin. Basically, for me, in my experience, oh my god, monsoon is here. In my experience, they tend to retain their variegation or their pattern with good amount of light, but it also depends on the genetics. So when I got mine, it was, well, see the thicker stump at the bottom? That's how I got mine. It was a 2-leaf cutting for $8 2 years ago. And of course, it eventually started to grow. The leaves when I got them were like bigger, but when all the more mature leaves started to fall off, it started to grow the smallest leaves that I could imagine. And then through time, it kind of grew bigger. This one looks kind of dusty, a bit kind of dusty. So we're also gonna dust some of the plants while carrying a very baby acting cat. So what I do with leaf care is sometimes I just spray them with this high pressurized, it's just plain water, tap water. And then I moisten paper towels. And if I have time, you know, I spend good amount of time wiping down the leaves, removing the dust or whatever accumulates on the leaves, in my case, cat hair too. It also helps your plants photosynthesize more. So it's just like making sure that they get and absorb as much light as they can, and that leaves or their satellites are in the best condition to absorb all those sunlight. So that's what I do. Normally with like philodendrons, like your Pink Princess or your Birkin, they tend to, like, what's the right term? Like the leaves tend to coil up, and sometimes you may need to assist them. But I recently read up that, you know, with good humidity, you could avoid that. But in my indoor setting, I can't really avoid that because I don't have humidifier all throughout the house, and I sprinkled all my philodendrons in the kitchen and the living room and that back room where I have some of the plants, so I can't avoid that. Even my Pink Princess is on my plant shelf over there, so it does get a good amount of light, but it doesn't get a good amount of humidity all the time, so that's probably why. Next would be this Philodendron pastazanum, I think. It used to be called a McDowelly or something. So this one's really cute. The leaves are also very venated of some sort. One sounds curious. So this one I got, I think January of 2019. So it's a year and a few months now. When it arrived in the mail, it had like the biggest leaves, like even bigger than this one now, like 150% bigger. I still have the dried leaves that I pressed on my books. And all I was left were like live stumps. I didn't give up. I still potted or planted the stumps. Eventually the seller had to send me a healthier specimen because the plants were stuck in the mail for about a week and a half from Florida. So it didn't really make it. The leaves were all dead. I pressed or squeezed on the stump or the nodes, and it's still alive. So I tried to salvage it, and a year and 6-7 months after, I have a full plant. So it does take a lot of patience. Next is, we're gonna talk, oh, I still have the mame here. Only if I don't have a kitty that I have to put you down. So we also have a philodendron mame. So some of the philodendrons, they like to crawl, just like this one. So this is my mame in a terracotta pot. This one's fairly new. I just got this in the last 8-10 months. They tend to crawl, I guess, and a more ideal pot would be something that's more elongated or rectangular. So the thing is, I will probably end up repotting this, but the mame has very nice silver speckling against that very heart-shaped leaf. So this is something that I also wanted for a long time, but I just recently took the plunge and, ordered some overseas as well, before COVID started, of course. It wasn't that bad. But this year I haven't really been acquiring a lot of plants internationally. Now let's talk about one of my favorites. Well, actually, I like them all. I love them all. This one is a Philodendron quercifolium, also tagged as a thin leaf pedatum or Philodendron pedatum, however you want to say it. So this one I found on eBay. I was bidding for one for like the past year or so and finally won one. So what I like about this one is that the leaves are lacy, if you may, or multi-lobed, and the shape is really interesting for me. So this is one of my pride and joy, because when I got this, I think it was only two leaves or three leaves, and then now it's growing more matured and beautiful, stunning leaves. So this one's the newest. And still in a chunky mix, this one deserves a moss pole or more support. The old pole broke off just before I started recording, so I had to replace it with this metal stick that you could easily get from your big box stores. And this is the next plant. This is a Philodendron mayoi. Mayoi. So this one's an old leaf that's about to fall off. This one doesn't often lose leaves, so this one I'm super proud of. This one was a trade from a nice lady that I met on Facebook. So when I was starting my plant journey, I joined almost all of these plant Facebook groups just so I could inform myself and expose myself to what's out there. I strongly believe in, doing your own research and informing yourselves of what's really out there. I wasn't really the type who would ask about plant care because I didn't have a lot of examples back then when I was starting, because everyone was always on a different location. They always liked the different kind of plants that I, compared to what I like. So plant care, I always stress this. It's kind of like something that's personalized. You have to consider your setup, like how your home is set up, what lighting you get, what climates you're usually experiencing, what type of plants you kind of gravitate towards, to what the needs are of these plants, what type of plant parent are you. You try to get to know yourself better as you go along with your plant hobby. One, you tend to discover, or am I someone who is more likely to overwater plants, and maybe changing my soil into a faster draining one would do the plants well if they like to dry in between anyways. Or if you're just like me who likes to overwater, then a terracotta might be a good choice for you, because terracotta soaks up or absorbs the excess moisture and it dries the soil faster and it makes it more favorable for your plants. So going back to how I got this, it was a nice trade from a nice lady. I remember her name was Dawn. And then she gave me a cutting. It was super juvenile. I didn't even know that they could be matured such as this kind of leaf. So we're gonna do a beauty vlogger kind of style. So anyways, I'm gonna be posting like a zoomed photo or video compilation on the side so you could appreciate the details. So yes, and then eventually after a year and a half, when I've discovered, how beautiful the matured ones are, I thought the mayoi and the radiatum or whatever was kind of the same. I think they're not. So I thought I bought another one, but they ended up like the same plant. It was just like a different kind of naming, or there was some slight difference, but I ended up getting two of the same plant. So I just spotted them together. I don't know which one is the original one, but I'm pretty sure one of these ones are the original ones that I got from Dawn over 2 years ago. So this is one of my favorites. Next would be this one. It's a Philodendron Brazil. It's kind of like a weird way to display your Brazil, really. One, because I don't have any more hanging space. I think winter of 2019, or was it 18? Can't remember now. So I thought why not prop some Christmas trees against a metal stake and let the Brazil climb instead of letting it drape, because I don't have any more hanging space. So eventually my Brazil ended up becoming more neon and neon as it got taller or longer. But I'm not really mad. The Brazil is really a good, stunning specimen. This could use a good wiping because it's on a dark corner on my kitchen shelf and it's not really getting as much light as it deserves, but it's still alive and I'm not mad about that. And then here is my Philodendron squamiferum. So this one I also got overseas from Europe when it wasn't really widely cultivated over here. I love this one because the leaves are also interesting. The shape is really interesting to me. They look like dragon faces of some sort. And the stems are very fuzzy. They used to be more red when I just got them from Europe, but now they're turning green. And based on exchanges with some plant friends on Instagram, theirs also turned green when it doesn't get the light that it used to. You know, the newer ones are still reddish at the base, but the old ones, which used to be all red, super red, is now just purely green on mine. So if I give it more light, the fuzziness of the stems will go back to red. And this one also ends up to be one of my favorites because of the shape. And it's fairly easy. Sometimes I even forget to water this at the same time that I water most of them, but it's very forgiving. I find that, well, I recently repotted this one because it deserved a newer pot. It outgrew the smaller pot that it was in. It was a 5-inch and now she's on a 6-inch pot. Next is my Philodendron Burle Marx. I also have a Burle Marx Fantasy that I'll show a clip later on. So Burle Marx is considered one of the more common philodendrons, but what makes this special is that this was a trade from a friend. Well, actually I bought this from my